as a word on my background to be able to do so. When I was a three-star general, I was Chief Operations Officer for all of the U.S. military. In my last job as a Commandant of the Marine Corps, I was also one of 6 advisors to both President Bush in his last years and the early years of President Obama. Ladies and gentlemen, I offer to you as a result of that, I think, what is a sobering assessment today. The greatest threat that I think we face on this planet is not global warming. It's not the global meltdown of our fiscal responsibilities. It is not a burgeoning China in the Pacific. The greatest threat that we face is a nuclear Iran. Having seen the ugly face of war, I appreciate the gravity of my statements. And of course, most recently it has been talked about the terrorist plot to kill the Saudi ambassador on United States soil and the collateral damage that could occur in that restaurant, numbering in the tens and perhaps the hundreds of Americans. All of that, ladies and gentlemen, is on a hair trigger. But none of that compares to what is most disturbing, and that is, again, the Iranian development of nuclear weapons. This development has been taking place now over 2 decades. The country has shrouded it or masked it, if you will, under the idea of nuclear energy. Any nation that has been attacked by terrorism, probably all nations, I would be so bold to say, are scared, incredibly scared of the idea of a state that supports terrorism in possession of nuclear weapons. But why war? Is war the only answer? Well, not necessarily, but we have tried engagement. We have tried quiet diplomacy. We tried proxy diplomacy. We tried sanctions. There's even been sabotage of the Iranian nuclear development. And I can't tell you today who that was, but all of that has simply delayed, not stopped, this progressive development as it continues. So what happens when Iran announces that they have now a nuclear weapons capability? Well, there are arguably 3 options. The first is military. You could launch an all-out attack to effect regime change. But ladies and gentlemen, that would be a difficult task. Another option, I suppose, would be to do nothing. America could potentially contain what will work here. But I suggest to you that what you would see instead is a regional proliferation of nuclear weapons. There is perhaps out there a third option, and that is change from within. And that's the change that Madame Rajavi proposes. My concern is that there may not be time, that there needs to be a sense of urgency if this potential catastrophe is to be avoided, and I'm just not sure that time is on our side. Folks, I have looked closely at the issue of delisting, and I think perhaps I differ from some of our dais today in that I am fairly optimistic that delisting will happen, and I believe it will happen soon. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1 month it becomes an election year in our country. And no American president wants to see our values tarnished, if not dashed, such as we saw in the April massacre, and no president wants to go into an election with blood on his hands. So what happens after delisting? Well, I think several things need to happen. There needs to continue, I believe, to be protection of the people of our shop. There needs to be what we call blue helmets from the United Nations on deck there to make sure there is no retribution for what may have been decided. The United States country team in Iraq needs to very much change their rhetoric, both military and civilian, with a new thought process now that these people are no longer on a list of terrorists, and they need to ensure that President Maliki and his organization do not, again, in some way, act poorly. We need to negotiate what's best for the people of Arashab. The Iraqi government is not a monolith. President Maliki needs to have pressure from within, because there are a number of people that I know in Iraq who are not the least bit happy that he is dancing at the end of the strings of people that are pulling those strings in the nation of Iran. And he also needs to understand that he may still be charged for violations that occurred in April. He certainly will be charged if other violations and loss of human life should follow. In closing, I return to this thought process of storm clouds on the horizon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my conviction that if we are to avoid war, the death and the destruction, the additional horsemen of the apocalypse that would accompany such a thing, we need an Iran that does not seek nuclear weapons. We need an Iran that does not support international terrorism. And we need an Iran that does not murder its people on the streets. What we do need is an Iran that recognizes individual freedoms, that allows for representative government, and that will have the full intent to join with its friends and allies in the region. What we need is an Iran that's envisioned by the tenets of Madame Rajavi.